how we doing? All right, today I have for you the flood. All right, a very famous story that is in the Bible. It's in the book of Genesis. And so today what I want to explore is the validity of that claim. Certainly not an authority on the subject matter, but I have a few ideas that I want to share with you. So, as the story goes in the book of Genesis, you have Noah and you have Noah's wife and their family, their kids, and God tells them to build an ark and gives them all the specific instructions, and many people think he's foolish, even his family, and lo and behold, God did really, in fact, tell Noah to build the ark, and look at that, it rains and it floods the earth completely, and Noah and his family survive with all the animals and of all creation, and we know some of the problems that arise from saying that he took, two of each animal, and how did he fit them all in the ark, and how did he sustain them with food for such a long duration, and yada, yada, yada. Okay, so, probably not really what happened. Probably not a true story. But what I want to suggest in this video is the idea that the possibility that there was an actual global, catastrophic flood. Now, looking at scientific data, looking at what's available to us, I'll kind of do a little diversion here into the glaciers and the ice age and looking at that. Now, science holds that there's, geological evidence to support massive glacier movements. I forget the time period, but it's a long, long time ago, right? Long before you and I were born. It even existed, or thought of existing. So, if that's possible, and science suggests that, and I'm trying to marry up science with the Bible, and I'm not saying that the account we have in the Bible is accurate, maybe only in the sense that there was actually a flood, a global flood, that could have arisen from the melting of these massive glaciers, right? I mean, we hear from many leftist, liberals, environmentalists out there that talk about how, is it the ice shield up in the Greenland and wherever else it is, further north, right? That it's receding and it's the temperature, the Earth's temperature is rising, and so therefore we're losing that. We need to do more to protect the environment. So if you have that and they're worried about rising sea levels, right? So why couldn't you say that if you had this massive glaciers covering North America and the northern hemisphere, why is it not plausible to suggest that those same glaciers, when the Earth's temperature, when the Earth shifted, which I think this is a normal occurrence, I don't want to get into the whole global warming debate, but my kind of theory on this is that it's normal for the Earth's temperature to fluctuate back and forth like it has. We don't have enough really long-term data to go way back thousands and thousands of years to determine what's the Earth's norm for its temperature. Anyways, I'm saying that the Earth warmed, right? Science holds that the glaciers melted. So when the glaciers melted, it probably raised the sea level. Now, science, I don't have the data at my fingertips, and maybe I'm onto something and maybe not. Maybe this has been debunked. Saying, well, yes, the sea levels did rise, but not to a substantial level to cause a global flood. Okay, but I'm just saying, there seems to me to be some evidence in science to support the idea of a global flood. Now, is it accounted for in the Bible? Well, probably not in its entirety, not like in its inaccuracy. I mean, what you have is a fanciful story, told to, convey, Jehovah's or Yahweh's dominance, over mankind, over the earth, and he flooded the earth to eradicate sin, not to mention the problems that creates for it didn't eradicate sin, and then he has to later send Jesus. So what was the point of flooding the earth if from beginning to time to end of time, what's going to happen, and why would you bother to flood the earth? It's not going to do anything. You know that you're going to have to send your son. So what was it? So that's just genocide? You just want to kill a whole bunch of people? So anyways, I don't think the story is true, is one of the first confessions I have. I think, though, what may have happened in the Genesis story of the flood is it may be a common story, and I think there's evidence for this, and I can't recall where I did pick up this bit of information, but there are other cultures, other civilizations, I think over even in, Asia and stuff like that, there were stories of a flood. So it's not unique to the Bible. So that may have been where the writer of Genesis got the idea from. It may have been a common thread. It may have been a common story that was, that was told among people. But maybe at its core, at its basis, maybe, again, it might be a long shot, a bit of a stretch, but maybe at the core of the story, its origins had some, originates in some actual event that took place. Maybe there was, and of course, they just adopted this story. And now when it says that the earth was flooded completely, I mean, how would the writers of the book of Genesis, how would the writer know if it was? I mean, they didn't have, satellite imagery. I'm saying they wouldn't have known this. And from their vantage point, the farthest the average human eye could see, maybe 25 miles out, maybe 100 miles out. I mean, you're not going to see the entire surface of the earth. How would you know that? Well, it was reported, it was divinely inspired by God for them to write these details. I don't believe that either. I'm just saying, but we got to do something with these stories. So I think there may have been something to the flood story, that there may have been an actual flood. Now, I know there's probably a group of people out there that think like I'm thinking right now, and that they want to somehow mesh science with religion and say, yes, see, this is how it, and it may be, I don't know, I could be completely wrong on this, and maybe there's no basis for this at all, and maybe science has debunked the idea of a flood. I'm not sure. But I'm thinking that if it was real, it's quite possible, that the glaciers melted and we had a flood. It seems like that seems common sense, but again, it's maybe a knowledge deficit for me. Maybe there's a lack of a void of knowledge here in my brain of, I had not taken, a lot of geology classes, and I've not taken classes that studied, how the earth has changed over the years. I'm just proposing that this is certainly a plausible explanation for the flood, accounting for the Genesis flood story, and that, maybe it did happen, but maybe I don't think I don't think it was an ark and he built the ark, and I think that's a fanciful tale to maybe an actual historical event that occurred. Now, how much historical corroboration can we get? I'm not sure, but like I mentioned, I do believe that there was an instance where I heard that there was, and again, this is just something that was said, but without knowing for sure, that, whether the accounts that I hear from other civilizations having a flood story, this is just what I heard. It could be just Christian propaganda. I don't really know. I'll have to do a little more research. But I thought, as I was thinking about this, that this might make for an interesting discussion, an interesting topic for a video, that, maybe there was a flood, and maybe what caused the flood was the melting of the glaciers, and all that seems to me to be very plausible. Doesn't mean it really happened, but I mean, I want to try to account, and it's not, and what I'm not trying to do is I'm not trying to say, well, because there's a story in the book, I mean, we could take it or leave it. We could discredit that story of the flood in Genesis and say, nah, it didn't happen, no. Or we could say, well, maybe there was some validity. Maybe there was something to that in its origins. It came from someplace out of a historic, that was passed down through an oral tradition to people. Maybe that's possible. But again, I don't sit here and say that I absolutely know. I'm not. I think that's foolish to be like that. The historian doesn't necessarily postulate, I think is the word, maybe, that he knows exactly what happened. But he says what is more, because he allows that anything is possible. But he says that anything. But he says, but what is more probable? And so you look at the situation, and it seems possible to me, and likely plausible that this is a good explanation for what happened. That maybe there was, as the seas rose because the glaciers melted, because science says the earth, most of the earth was covered, at least the northern hemisphere was covered with glaciers, right? So, and supposedly they were pretty thick, it was pretty high. I don't know how many miles high or what it was, but so it seems to me there's some evidence there to suggest, to propose, that there was a flood. But again, probably not like what we have in the Genesis account. Not likely Noah and his family, and I think that was, all designed for allegory. I don't think that was just to tell storytelling. I don't think, I don't think it had anything to do, but at its origin, at its roots, maybe the story comes out of someplace. So anyways, out of some place of an actual historical event. So thanks for watching the video. Go ahead and leave your comments. Let me know what you guys think. And if you think this is just completely preposterous to propose this idea of meshing some scientific data with the Bible and saying that, well, some of these events I'm not saying all. Trust me, there's a lot of stuff in the Bible that I'm not even going to begin to tackle that I just think is outright fabrication. So, but I wonder if maybe there is a possibility of some evidence of historical stuff that could be in there. I think we've got to allow for that possibility that that could be the case. So, hope you're doing well. I'll talk to you again soon. Take care.